as I mentioned in the last video, even though Shurima still has a lot of awesome lore to offer us, while some of the cards reveal awesome new things, they don't give us any major lore reveals. For example, it is cool that Thalia was reunited with her people, but that's really where her cards end. And then there are all the cards related to Chronomancy and to Icathia, but it is highly likely that Zilean will become a champion in Legends of Runeterra at some point, so there is no use talking about these now either. That's why today we are going to focus on the last important thing that was revealed to us with the cards from Shurima. And that's all the juicy lore around Nasus, Renekton, and the Baccai. Now, I am well aware that some of you may have never even heard the name Baccai, so let me quickly explain who the Baccai are and where the term came from. We actually first heard about the Baccai in the tips which you can find on the loading screen of League of Legends. You know the little line of text that appears in the middle when the loading takes too long? That's where this lore reveal was first placed. And it's been exclusive to that place for quite a while, because it wasn't until we got the book Realms of Runeterra that the Baccai were properly addressed. There it was explained who the Baccai are, and to give us examples we even got some pictures. So in short, the Baccai are Ascended, just like Renekton or Nasus, who were unworthy to become Ascended. So, the Baccai are created either when someone steps onto the dais of Ascension, while the Sun Priests don't deem that person worthy, or when the ritual of Ascension fails, or when something goes wrong in general. For example, even though he looks nothing like all the other Baccai, technically Xerath is one of them. Xerath did undergo the ritual of Ascension, but he forced the power into himself. But while that was happening, his body couldn't handle the power, and that was one of the reasons why the entire capital city exploded. Also, that's why Xerath's body is essentially melted arcane energy. Anyway, before we got these cards in Legends of Runeterra, we never heard anything about the Baccai. So while we knew they existed because that was confirmed in Realms of Runeterra, we never learned about what happened to them and what they are doing right now. And so, with this unnecessarily long intro, I'm trying to tell you that's what we will learn today. But first, let's quickly go through the descriptions of Renekton and Nasus. A quick note here, all of these notes on the Ascended are the quotes of Scribe Kanir, and they are written in the history of the Ascended host. And just in case you don't know, the Ascended host was the name of the Shuriman ancient army, which was made up of the Ascended warriors. And the leader of the Ascended host was Setaka. Anyway, it could be easily forgotten that he was once human, for the visage of the crocodile fits his love for bloody battles so well. Again, these quotes are from the history of the Ascended host. Now in the art here, we can see that Renekton is surrounded by the Sand Threshers, which are his followers, which Renekton doesn't even care about. We learned about all of this in Renekton's latest story, we also have a video on that. But you can see that they are actually fighting the Baccai. More on those in just a second. More importantly, if you look behind Renekton, you can see Nasus coming out of his library. And that's because both the cards on Renekton's side and on Nasus' side tell a story of their battle. Unfortunately, we are not exactly sure if this battle is canon in any way, but we can pick up some hints here and there. So many long years in the dark, with that betrayer filling his head with words of hate and resentment, breeding contempt for his brother. It only fueled his rage, made him stronger. Here, in the leveled up version, you can see that Renekton is charging forward, alongside the Sand Threshers, even though, once again, he couldn't care less about them. But here, in the background, you can see two of the other cards which Renekton got, both of which are members of the Sand Threshers. But above him, I believe you can see Makara, a beast that was described to be so massive, it could swallow an entire horse in one bite. Also, an important fact, Makara has 3 heads. And of course, there should be Ra's Bloodmane riding the beast, but we'll see that later. I just like how this art really gives us context as to how massive the beast is. And speaking of massive beasts, then there is the third level of Renekton. When he finally has a chance at revenge on his brother Nasus, Renekton will stop at nothing. He will destroy all, and Shurima will again be left a ruin. Now, we know that at the end of Renekton's story, he was headed south because rumors were that there was a hidden library. So that's where Nasus would be. And Renekton learned about this from the Sand Threshers. So that's where this place could be. But more importantly, notice how massive both Renekton and Nasus are here. In the previous art, they were quite tiny. So what's happening here? You see, although we don't have any clear confirmation about this, I believe that this magic which can enlarge them is absolutely what the Ascended can do. Because if you think about it, this is what some of the Darkin can do as well. And the Darkin are corrupted Ascended. Think of someone like Aatrox. Aatrox can be as small as a normal man, but the more people he slays, the larger he gets. Perhaps the best example of this was in Aatrox's original teaser. There he started as a small warrior, but he got massive over time. I am pretty sure this growing in size is somehow related to the blood magic, which all the Darkin wielded and they used it to reshape their bodies. But because we never learned where the blood magic came from, I wonder if the blood magic is a twisted version of what Renekton and Nasus are using here. I believe that here both of them are siphoning the souls of all the other people on the battlefield. And the more people die, the bigger they get. Nasus's cards kinda hint at that. You'll see that later. But here I just wanted to point out that this is the closest we got to explaining the origin of the blood magic. We still don't really know where it came from. But also, I love that this gave context to why Renekton and Nasus get bigger on Summoner's Rift when they use their ultimates. It's just a really cool detail. So let's get to Nasus now. Nasus's newly won blessing allowed him countless lifetimes to spend in study and contemplation over the nature of life and death. But this same extended lifespan would, after the fall of Shurima, also prove to be his curse. Once again, because these are quotes from the history of the Ascended Host, they are mentioning everything that happened in Nasus's life. And this part specifically is referring to the fact that one day Nasus grew sickly, and his body was slowly perishing. And was it not for his ascension, he would surely die. So the newly won blessing, which was mentioned here, is Nasus's ascension. In this form, he could study in the libraries for eternity. The art of this card is mimicking what we saw in Renekton's card. This is the part where he was walking out of the library. And as you can see, he killed some of the Sand Threshers on his way. And, more importantly, here is where you can see Nasus siphoning their souls. Of course, Nasus siphoning souls and getting bigger over time is absolutely his theme. That's what he does on Summoner's Rift as well. But I believe that's the reason why he gets bigger here. And we get even more hints towards this from his second level. For years, Nasus and his brother Renekton served the Empire. Nasus was a scholar, Renekton a fierce warrior. It was not until the two were called upon to confront the betrayer, Xerath, that Nasus was forced to make a terrible choice. Of course, this is referring to the fact that Nasus had to lock Renekton and Xerath inside a tomb. And that's where Xerath slowly corrupted Renekton's mind. Now in this art, we can see that Nasus is siphoning souls. I believe that this is showing us how Nasus got bigger. But the interesting part are the waters around him. These are highly likely waters of the Mother of Life, which is the main river that spreads from the center of Shurima. But if you think about it, we have seen someone else siphoning souls connected to the holy waters. This art confirms nothing, but I quickly wanna point out that there is the theory that there is some kind of relation between the Mother of Life in Shurima and the Waters of Life of the Blessed Isles. It seems like these waters can preserve life, which means that if Viego learns that Shurima also holds some holy waters, that might be a reason for Viego to visit Shurima. And that might link us to the upcoming champion, which is hinted to be from Shurima. Remember, Riot confirmed that the champions of 2021 will be somehow connected to Viego. There will be an overall story arc. And there is the really tiny chance that this art is teasing at something. Anyway, then there is the third form. His hope revived by Shurima's rise, Nasus finally returned after years spent wandering the desert, eager to make amends with his brother. He never suspected he would find Renekton, maddened by years spent suffering at Xerath's hand in the tomb, waiting for him. And once again, here both brothers are colossal. So yeah, we kinda know how Nasus got bigger. It most likely has to do with the siphoning of souls. But we still need to learn more about Renekton. Referring back to the newest story, there were some hints as to what is happening to Renekton as well. There, just as Renekton was about to die, some ancient celestial magic kicked in, and his flesh and bones snapped back together, and his body was renewed. Again, just hints towards the blood magic. By the way, you can also see this celestial power in action in his second level up animation. So in general, I am wondering if Riot has more plans for this. Really quickly, I also want to mention that Nasus has the Siphoning Strike as his spell, which simply says your soul will be measured. And since this is using the exact same art as we saw in his second level, that's why I believe that there he was siphoning souls. In fact, the same goes for the Rite of Calling. The quote says, "a necessary sacrifice," which again is showing us Nasus most likely siphoning souls. Before we move away from these two, I quickly want to mention a really cool detail hidden in Renekton's level up animation. There, if you go frame by frame, you can see that Renekton is actually fighting tiny Nasuses. And I believe that this is just showing us what Renekton sees when he loses his temper. According to the stories, Renekton can be very easily consumed by bloodlust and hatred towards his brother. And when that happens, I believe this is what he sees. This is why he is so aggressive all the time. He simply sees Nasus in everyone. But finally, then we get to some of the Baccai. First, there is the Baccai Reaper. The Bakkai all fled or were spared following their failed ascension, and none have seen them since. Who knows how long they have hidden in those dark tombs, bearing the mark of their shame. Again, quotes from the history of the Ascended Host. So here it was confirmed that once the Bakkai were created, they fled away in shame, and in fact in most cases, they ventured below the surface to avoid the normal life above. And there they served as guardians of the Shuriman tombs. This is new information to us. Before this, we simply didn't know what the Bakkai were doing, but now we know that they wanted to hide in shame, so they just happened to do it underground. If you pay attention to the background, you can see some relations to some of Sivir's cards, where she had a group of people tomb raiding, and as you go through all the Bakkai, you can see all of them dying at some points. Then I should quickly mention some of the Sand Thresher cards, which as we mentioned are the people who decided to follow Renekton, but the descriptions don't really reveal anything new. The Sand Threshers do everything with their companions: fight, hunt, kill, and eat. All of this was explained in the latest story. But quickly notice that to the left of this person, that's not a crocodile. That's one of those dune swimmers. It's a native creature to Shurima. And in fact, it is highly likely that one of these creatures, when they get corrupted by the void, make the Zersai, which is essentially Rek'Sai's brood. I should also quickly mention that we got the Exhaust card, which artistically mimics the icon you get in League. But then we get the next Bakkai, coincidentally showing us what happened to the person that got exhausted. Each grain she spills takes a second from their lives, wearing away at them like wind. As you can see, this Bakkai was meant to become some kind of a desert fox. You can see the furry tail at the back, and you can even see the furry legs, even though those look more goat-like. Anyway, this Bakkai is using the sand as a weapon. And if you have a look at what it does to the Tomb Raider's equipment, it is turning it into dust. Which makes me believe that this is not corroding the weapon, just like some acid would do. I believe that this is more related to the Chronomancers. This sand might be speeding up time. That's why it is turning things to sand and dust. Next, Renekton got a card for the follower riding one of those dune beasts, and she's killing one of Azir's loyal followers, but that's all we really got from this. So even though she's not riding a crocodile, she is still one of the Sand Threshers. Nasus then also got a spell called Weight of Judgment. One life so that others might thrive. This card is most likely referring to the Ascension. Here Nasus may be referring to the fact that by turning one mortal into an Ascended, who will essentially have to live forever, it allows others to thrive. Next up we have the Rampaging Bakkai, which just like the others is trying to protect a tomb. The bearer of a grudge's resentment only deepens, even if those they bear the grudge against are long dead. This card didn't really reveal anything, but when you have a look at the ability connected to this one, things suddenly change. The Bakkai are twisted, warped versions of what they might have been, had they become parts of the Ascended Host, and the rage they feel at their failure must be unleashed somewhere. So yeah, while some may feel shame after becoming a Bakkai, others may be filled with rage. Next, there is a card for Ra's Bloodmane, as I mentioned when we talked about Renekton, who not only was the main character of the story, which we already mentioned quite a few times, but also here you can see him slaying what I believe is one of the Zersai. But what's cool about this card is that it gave us some cool new details about the Mak'gora. When this here croc was born, the others took bets on how long he would live, assuming he was the runt of the litter and a freak to boot. Nobody thought to bet on him eating all his siblings. But this takes us to the last Baccai cards. There is Nasus' Spirit Fire, which simply shows Nasus igniting souls, but more importantly, there is the Sanctum Conservator. And even though this looks to be some kind of a construct, this is actually a Baccai. The Bakkai are tasked with defending the inner sanctum to safeguard the ancient treasures there, and for the sake of mortals that might think themselves clever enough or mighty enough to withstand the weight of the curator's judgment. Now, if we have a look around, you may see some references to Nasus, and what may even be Renekton, that kinda looks like a crocodile, but there are also other ascended around. Unfortunately, we never really learned what the curator's judgment was. Here we can just see that when someone is deemed unworthy of whatever the judgment is, they just get turned to dust. But if we have a look at the ability connected to this card, we do get at least some info. This one is called the Conservator's Judgment. We are where both gods and men find their end. It doesn't tell us much, but I do believe that this hints at these being the judges who decide who can live and who dies. And this goes for both men and for the Bakkai, or perhaps even the Ascended. But yeah, it is sad that we simply didn't learn more about this. I would love to see what's the deal with these. I was so curious about this that I even went to the wiki and I looked for the quotes of this card. And there I learned something scary. It almost looks like this might be the god of death for the Shurimans. You know, just like Kindred are in some other regions. That could be why they have two heads. But I really don't want to dive deeper into this. When it comes to death, I always go all over the place. Just so you know what I'm talking about, here are some quotes.
We see to the in-between. All mortals meet us, though our audience is brief. Between two worlds we slept. Now we have awoken. Gods and men end with me.
But besides these quotes, I also want to show you some other quotes, which simply hint that they are protecting something important.
Come, sister, fate requires our counsel. Come, brother, we must attend the tomb. We are more than counsel, Nasus.
So yeah, it is really sad to see that we don't know more about these. But that is it for the Shuriman cards. As I pointed out, we are still not done with Legends of Runeterra, as we still got Jarvan to talk about, and then maybe LeBlanc if people are interested. But either way, we are done with Shurima for now. I am now going to patiently await Zilean. Although with all the Icathian references, it would be cool to see Jax as well.